Welcome to The Real Score, where we unspool the film reel, slip on our headphones, and discuss the character of music in the movies. I'm Sam Fife, and I'm joined for this new venture by Fake Nerd co-host Brandon T. McClure.
Hello, I'm here too. Do I say something about myself now?
I mean, might as well. I think that's a great idea.
Hi guys, this is part of the Fake Nerd podcast family of podcasts, but don't let that discourage you because this is a brand new show that we're going to be talking about music. I'm Brandon T. McClure. I like to call myself the executive producer of the Fake Nerd podcast because that means absolutely nothing. And that's really what I do on the show. I've got, I got a bunch of writing stuff that you guys can do. I put my all over the Fake Nerd podcast. You can also check out, I'm everywhere, man.
We're also joined for this show by the incredibly talented Jeremy Villucci, who has worked on all of our musical pieces for the Fake Nerd Network. Hey, Jeremy.
Hey there, guys. I'm Jeremy Villucci. You've probably never seen me before, and that's okay because I like it that way. I'm a musician. I do that pretty much full time. I work as a teacher where I teach piano and guitar, work as a music director at a church, and I'm also just kind of dabbling in composition and playing in bands and whatnot. And I think Sam mentioned I've done all the music for the Fake Nerd podcast. So now you can finally put a name and a face to all the sounds that I'm making for y'all.
Which is super appreciated.
Well, I just want to say, it's really cool. We've been trying to do something. Well, we've been trying to do this show specifically for a little while. And it's really cool that we're finally getting Jeremy Villucci on to do a podcast with us because he is a very talented individual. We've, Sparks and I have, Sam and I, what do you want me to call you?
Here I'm Sam. So yeah, I'm Sparks Witty for the Fake Nerd Network. But here I am Sam Fife. Sparks Witty is the moniker that I usually use on the Fake Nerd Network, but not here. And I have a background in studying film and television that I got a bachelor's degree in, and American Studies, and huge film score enthusiast. So here we are. We're gonna do this show. I think it's gonna be a little bumpy, but it's gonna be fun.
I want to piggyback off what Brandon said there because, I think it goes even deeper than that. The three of us have been friends since 2006.
That's true.
And we've been a core creative group. The three of us have been wanting to do movie stuff to some degree for pretty much the entire time we've known each other. Brandon, one of my earliest memories with you was writing a whole freaking script for a movie in the library at the high school, and then the three of us ended up making a bunch of unrelated movies after that. But I also think that what's cool about doing this show is that the three of us kind of connected on going to movies and also being really into the scores. I think the first movie that the three of us, or at least that I saw with you all, was King Kong. We saw that in theaters. And I remember going and downloading the score to that and listening to it all the time. And I know that it played in at least your car, Brandon, too. So we've been connecting about scores since we've known each other. So it's crazy that now we're doing a whole show on it.
Yeah, and I think that's really fun because we've also noticed an evolution of film scores over the years. Even as we've just known each other, just film scores have changed in the last 20 years from where they were back when even King Kong was around. And that's kind of what was kind of the idea we wanted to kind of approach this thing is how modern film scores differ from older film scores and things like that. And we each have a different understanding of film scores. I probably know the least technical stuff when it comes to film scores. I took one class in college and I loved it. I loved it dearly. But I'm an aficionado of them. I love them dearly. And I kind of approach this with I'm here to learn. I'm here to learn more about what I love so much.
It's a natural jumping off point to talk about this, actually, because we were talking about how film scores have changed and whatnot. And one of the things, because we're talking about the Batman today, right? And one of the things that I wanted to talk about primarily in regards to how film scores have changed is in so much as how blockbusters have shaped cinematic scoring and how what we kind of visualize when we think of movies and movie scores is very different than, like, say, even just 20 years ago. And that themes are not gone, but we see less of them, or at least they're a lot less developed now, especially in bigger blockbuster movies. I'm not going to name any corporate names like Disney. Oh, I just did.
It's funny. It's funny you mentioned that, because like Giacchino's probably one of the best for still bringing back a lot of score. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of like some of his Marvel properties, even the Spider-Man series.
Spider-Man. Literally funny that you mentioned that. I was doing just like a sketch, like a mock-up, doing some orchestration, and it's on my Instagram, I think, too. I posted it, and I got like a minute and a half into it, and I kind of hit the chorus, like the climax of the piece, and I got like halfway through it, and then I realized, wait a minute, this is the Spider-Man theme. I literally had rewritten the Spider-Man theme, but it was a good theme, like that was the reason I was playing with it, because I got this idea in my head. I was like, and it was like, wait a minute, this is a Spider-Man theme, but it had stuck with me. I didn't realize it had stuck with me, but it did.
Sure.
Because it's a good theme. Yeah,
I also like he did the first Doctor Strange movie, and I think he did a pretty good Doctor Strange theme. He's very much, well, the reason why we're talking about the Batman, so we're talking about the Batman, Michael Giacchino's the Batman, and the reason why we picked Michael Giacchino specifically is because he's very old Hollywood in the way he approaches his themes and his scores. He is one of the few blockbuster composers specifically who is doing who makes sure that he creates themes for his characters, for the characters that he's scoring in the movies that he's doing.
Mm-hmm. And with a movie like The Batman, which is a detective film, a very like neo-noir kind of suspenseful movie, you wouldn't think there's much room for a musical theme, like a melodic kind of theme. And, especially in modern cinema, there tends to be an emphasis on minimalism when it comes to melody. That's kind of like a modern take on musical scores. And what's interesting about this score is both. It is both melodic and features symphonic development of the melody and the motifs, but it's also very minimalistic in order to keep the energy of the movie, contained.
Right.
And so, I mean, like I because we were doing this, I went in and I really did like a deep dive study on the score, and I saw a lot more in this score than I would have if I had just watched the movie. But that happens anytime you dig into a score. This is one of my favorite scores of the last like 10, 15 years, to be honest. Really, like I didn't think I was going to like it this much. When I saw the initial trailer, and we'll get back to this because I think it's actually interesting, that we heard the theme in the trailer. That's kind of unusual. But when I heard the theme originally, my first thought, same thought that everybody had, was, that's just the Imperial March. That's just Darth Vader, man. And I wasn't floored by it. I was like, this is nothing. But boy, do I have a lot to say on it now. Oh man, do I have a lot to say on it. And I think that it's one of the best examples of long form symphonic development in a blockbuster movie, especially with the fashion, the trend of superhero movies these days, and the fact that a lot of them don't have very recognizable themes. One of the things that I ask my students when I'm teaching like composition and whatnot is I say, okay, hum Thor's theme.
Sure.
Like what's that? And like if you go into the score, you could probably find what would be considered his theme. I haven't studied the score, but like I can't remember it. It wasn't developed enough in the movie, and which I think is a shame, because I think with the MCU the way it is, how connected it is, boy, wouldn't it have been cool if all those characters had really recognizable and developed themes, and when they got together, it would be like this whole thing. You could do a whole thing with that. Missed opportunity.
We've been saying the same thing. We've been literally saying that. The three of us together have been saying that for over a decade now.
And what's a shame too is that there are some good scores within the MCU. We mentioned the Spider-Man theme is good. I like the Doctor Strange music. I especially like Danny Elfman's Multiverse of Madness score. I thought that was just belligerent, really fun. Yeah, not a lot of like really great themes. And I don't want to be inflammatory or anything, but even Sylvester's Avengers theme, I'm kind of like, it's okay, it's fine, But like, it would have been cooler if it had been an umbrella or like a tree of all of the themes in the Avengers. You know, it would have been more impactful. So, I mean, that's my opinion. But anyway, talking about the Batman, this movie has really great themes, and not a lot of them. Right? There's the main thing.
Yeah.
There's Selina's theme. There's the Ave Maria, and then there's the sort of what we call the in the score. The piece that I've been naming it after is the Bat's True Calling. And
I've been calling it, like, in our notes when I was writing down like where it was used, I was calling it the Gotham theme. Because I think the Batman theme is also partially a Gotham theme, but I'll get to why I specifically think that when we get into it in a bit.
Well, because I actually have a counterpoint to I've really really dug into these themes. I don't know when you want to talk about these specifically.
We'll get into those in just a moment. Let's do real quick. We are talking about The Batman, composed by Michael Giacchino. This is a film that is written by Matt Reeves and Peter Craig. It's directed by Matt Reeves. Giacchino, of course, is famous for scores like we've mentioned. He's also famous for scores like Up, Ratatouille, Doctor Strange, you guys set up top, and of course, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. Giacchino has worked on 4 films with Matt Reeves before this that include the previously named Apes and its sequel, War for the Planet of the Apes, along with Let Me In and Cloverfield. And when I was doing some digging about this...
I'm sorry, Matt Reeves directed Let Me In?
Yeah.
Ooh. Nice.
I saw them at Comic-Con.
Yeah.
Weird.
So when I was digging into this, I learned that Giacchino composed the main themes for the film before anything else had been shot. He designed for moods and concepts based on conversations that he was having with Reeves at the time. And then Reeves played some of that for the actors, and Robert Pattinson credited it for helping him form the character, which I think is really cool to know. So like just as you highlighted, Selina, the Batman, Ave Maria, all of those things, those were kind of formed as ideas for it, just based off mood before anything else had even happened.
And what a difference that makes in the overall delivery of the film, because what in talking about the Ave Maria, just separating that specifically, it's a famous piece. Everybody's very familiar with it. It takes on a very interesting context within the film. It's both diegetic and non-diegetic, right? There are moments where it is meant to like tell the audience to hint to the audience that the Riddler is around, like when they're at the funeral, like it's used right in the sound design, but then it's also used in the stage, right? Like Riddler sings Ave Maria, like in a way that like knows that's his theme.
Real quick, Jeremy, because you use the terms diegetic and non-diegetic, for those that are listening that might not know, I know what you're saying, but explain the terms for any listeners who might not know those terms.
Sure. So like the best definition that I can use for that is like, if you hear a song playing within a movie, and then like a character turns off the radio and the song stops, right? Then it is that piece was diegetically within the movie. The characters could hear the piece of music.
Right. I think a good example in the Batman is what you just mentioned, like the funeral scene when they're going to that. You have a boys' choir in the scene singing Ave Maria. At first, you don't see them, but you do, and that is diegetic. It is part of the film. All the characters are hearing it too.
Mr. Wayne, Mr. Wayne, you know, you really could be doing more for this city. Your family has a history of philanthropy, but as far as I can tell, you're not doing anything. If I'm elected, I want to change that. My God. I'm gonna go pay my respects. Will you wait for me? I want to continue this.
Right. And that makes for a really interesting, playing with sound in the movie, because it becomes much more woven into the story that way. It forces you to ask questions in a way that just, having a kind of nondescript underscore wouldn't. So the fact that the music was written sort of concurrently with the rest of the process of the film, super, super interesting. And I think that they might be onto something, or at least in so much that what I noticed with a lot of corporate properties, and franchises, is that the music, a lot like the animation department, kind of just gets sidelined and thought of as just kind of it's just like a background product to make the actors look good, right? Like that kind of is the vibe I get from.
It's an afterthought.
Yeah, it's an afterthought, right? And you have a lot of really, really talented people working with a lot of teams of writers and like a music editor, combing through all these different suites and music productions to create a score, rather than the John Williams model of him sitting there with a stopwatch and a piano and filming, doing it to the dailies. So, there's a lot of different ways to score a movie. This is a really interesting way, but primarily it brings focus to the music in relation to the characters.
Well, I want to talk about that kind of collaboration real quick, because you're right, Jeremy. We rarely see that, and even in John Williams' heyday, let's call that the gold, the Jerry Goldsmith, the James Horner, the John Williams. We didn't really see it a lot then either. There was a bit more collaboration between the director and the composer back then. But something like this is kind of almost like Michael Giacchino was heavily involved with the writing of the film, so much as who did you say was the writer of this film?
It's Matt Reeves and Peter Craig.
Right. It's almost like he was in there in the writing process with them. He was there in pre-production, which is very rare to see a composer in pre-production. And, you kind of see that as you probably see that similarly in Werewolf by Night, another Michael Giacchino production that came out last year, but he directed that too. So he was composing and directing that at the same time. And so that was that's even even a rarer thing to happen. So with Michael Giacchino and Matt Reeves and Craig Robinson,
Peter Craig.
Dang it. Craig Robinson is a very different person.
Yes.
Peter Craig have done is kind of create a collaboration unheard of in Hollywood, and it made the score and the movie by default better for it.
Mm-hmm.
It stems from, that's why I mentioned the history between Reeves and Giacchino up top, is because that's why it happens. It's that Matt Reeves knows Giacchino personally and wanted to bring him to this project specifically, knew that it was something he'd bring a lot to the table. So they start having those conversations the moment that Matt Reeves knows he's doing this movie.
Yeah.
It's there's a brilliance to the simplicity of this score. And I don't mean that in a condescending way.
No, absolutely not. In fact, speaking from the perspective of a composer, the simpler your music, the more developmental potential it has. I mean, this theme. I've been calling it the Vengeance theme. It's only 2 notes.
Oh, sure.
Right? You only need 2 notes for a good theme, right?
Oh, sure.
You only two.
I'm so glad you played Jaws specifically because I have a comment about that, but go with what you're saying.
Okay, so yeah, what I was mentioning is the developmental potential. Just from composer perspective, a lot of times composers, and not speaking strictly in Hollywood, I'm talking about, like anywhere from amateur composers to professional composers, they get locked into their music and they start writing some long theme and whatnot. And the more complicated your theme is, the more difficult it is to fit that into the puzzle of your symphonic development. Like if you've got this big elaborate theme, try that theme with more than the chords that you've already selected. You're going to have a hard time. But something like this, there's only two notes in there. Those two notes have a lot of crossover with just basically all the chords and all the music theory that you could think of. Like these two notes have unlimited potential to develop with, so he has a lot more room to play with. Good composers tend to err on the side of simplicity. Even John Williams, the man, the GOAT, he plays with like the most simple chord progressions of all time. Most of his themes are Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Like it's just the truth, and that's what makes them so accessible. But of course, he's got the lineage and the pedigree to back it up. I mean, he can compose a lot with those really simple chords. So
what I think is interesting about what you said there is that we see oftentimes with scores, so many times like a let's pick Spider-Man. Let's pick real quickly Spider-Man No Way Home, which brings back two other Spider-Men who have themes. James Horner composed a theme that I think is pretty good for The Amazing Spider-Man, and Danny Elfman composed a theme for Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man movies. And I think both of them are pretty distinctive, but they're not interwoven into Giacchino's score for the movie. And I wonder if that's because those themes are possibly more complicated than something far more simple, like we see with like Jaws theme. When there's a long song going on, a long suite going on in Jaws, and then Jaws shows up, you can quickly play his Jaws' theme real quickly, and people will know, oh, he's there.
On that, there was a moment where they used the Danny Elfman theme very briefly in No Way Home, and I thought it was a weird moment. Actually, I can't remember exactly where it was, but I remember thinking that's a weird place for this piece of music, and I want to say it was like Mary Jane's theme or something. It was like, why
they do use Ox theme, which I actually really appreciate. When he shows up, they use Elfman's Doc Ox theme show up quite prominently. So
okay, I mean, really, the what you're saying, it could be some degree of it, but also I think it's more to do with the fact that like there's just too many cooks in the kitchen when it comes to like a Marvel movie, and Giacchino working on a Marvel movie, under the umbrella of Disney, he's probably not got all the control that he would maybe with this film or something else. And you have a lot more hands, dipping in and deciding what's going to happen and what's not. I think it had more to do with that than it being too complicated to fit in, because the themes are pretty simple in the sense that they're recognizable with just a few notes. Like the Danny Elfman's theme is those sort of like arpeggio kind of things in the strings are very pretty easy to pull off in any key. So you could have done that. I think it was just more to do with the corporate elements than anything.
and I want to real quickly point out James Horner's Amazing Spider-Man theme is very funny to me sometimes because it's very close to Titanic's main theme.
Oh, that's a lot of Horner's music.
Wait, Horner reusing music from other things?
It's not that he reused it either. It's just that it's very close.
Right. Yeah. He took it, changed it a little bit.
Yeah.
Don't go watch Fievel Goes West unless you want to hear an Aaron Copland album.
Fievel Goes West is a great movie, but we're not here to talk about that.
Fievel Goes West. It's such a guilty pleasure.
Me too. All right, we're talking about the Batman, though. Let's go back to the Batman.
The Batman.
I really like that you call it the Vengeance theme. I think that's very accurate because I've been referring to it as the Batman theme, but not in the terms of it's Batman's theme, but it's really the theme of this film.
If we want to talk about that, I have so much to say about that.
Yeah. So real quick, what I want to get off is that I think it Giacchino masterfully orchestrates it throughout the film, and amongst other simple yet resonant cues, and the way that he changes it and manipulates it to fit into all these different settings, which we'll get into them later in the episode, how they're fitting where they are. There's an obsession with shadows that Batman has that really comes across from using this theme, and it's so right on the line of like, this could sound like a villain's theme so easily. And it keeps him in that gray area. But the reason I wanted to bring that up is because you brought up Jaws specifically. And like my main statement, like this mostly goes to the opening of the film, but I think it's accurate of the whole film overall, is what the vengeance theme is saying is Gotham City is full of predators, and the Batman's the biggest predator. Yes. The Batman is Jaws.
We're on the same page here.
We're here, baby. We're here.
Yes. In fact, in the opening scene where Batman is doing the opening narration, talking about his role in Gotham, essentially, the it doesn't play the theme exactly. I'm going to do like a. It's like a. It's almost playing it like in the double bass. You can hear the an echo of the rhythm of the theme, and we don't hear the actual established theme with, I think, the bells. It might be wrong. It might be a different instrument, but the actual established theme until you see him putting the makeup on and becoming the Batman. But it's from the first bar, the establishment of, and then what you're saying about the shadows and predatoriness, the horns and like the bass clarinets and bassoons are going like boom, boom, and like just little sweeps like shadows moving in the night. Really, really cool introduction of the theme. But talking about that vengeance theme and why I call it the vengeance theme, because the word, the vengeance theme, came from reflecting on how it parallels with the what you were calling the Gotham theme. Check this out. So this is the vengeance theme, right? It's a major third. It's B flat to G flat. Which, side note, kind of weird that that's a major chord, because major chords are demonstrably happy. Kind of weird that it's playing a major harmony, but one of the reasons why it would be a major harmony is because it's just a comfortable place to land. And the Gotham theme, or what I was calling the Bat's True Calling, is grown from that theme. Instead of going, it goes. There it is. I'm gonna miss it. Anyway, it's the same theme. And the reason that I think it's really interesting is because if you relate it to the character arc of the Batman, think about his position when the movie opens. He's dealing with a lot of trauma, and he's sort of dissociating by becoming this predator, right? And when you liken it that way, he's landing on a very comfortable, which is like it's a resolution, it's a period. That's the end of the thought. There's pain, and I'm going to stop it. I don't need to think any further than that. But when he starts growing as a character, the resolution doesn't come so easily. He has to kind of like work through the conflict of the tension of the notes. We're not done here. Still not done. Still haven't resolved. And then we're back home. So it reflects the sort of like the therapy that he's going through, essentially, that in order for you to grow, you have to face conflict. You have to face tension instead of just landing on the very first thing that sounds comfortable, which is I'm just going to take vengeance.
So I want to stay completely focused on the moments and uses of the Batman's true calling or the Gotham theme.
Yes.
I'll tell you the reason I called it the Gotham theme.
Mhm.
I'm very confident of this because when I rewatched the movie this last week, I was pretty much shutting out anything that wasn't scored to the best of my ability.
Sure.
And do you know when that theme first comes up off the top of your head, Jeremy?
I was listening for it. In fact, I think I wrote it down.
So I'll tell you, it's when he's
funeral.
It's when he's in the car going to the funeral.
Yes.
And that was one of the reasons I called it the Gotham theme, is because it's like Gotham calling out to the predator of the Batman. Because you're seeing the people on the streets during that moment demanding they be treated better, demanding justice, being upset at the corruption that's being revealed by the Riddler. Like, the Riddler has riled up something that's real in the city and is a real problem. And that really, like, looking forward to the end of the film, right? That's Batman's thing, that, like, the way I was going about this, that's not the way this is going to work. Right. I can't be the shark in Gotham. I have to be the hero of Gotham.
In a way, I mean, we're kind of saying the same thing. He integrates into Gotham instead of hiding from Gotham. He becomes part of Gotham. He shows his face. Not really, but he shows himself.
Yes, exactly. So that theme,
Torch.
that theme shows up at that moment, and then it comes back in again for when he first goes back into his parents' room in the manor. And it's there, and then it's reworked into the end of the movie when he's saving the people and guiding them out.
When they go off on the motorcycles in opposite directions.
Right, the very end of the film. Yeah. I think that's really good. Yes. Go ahead, Brandon.
Well, what's so interesting to me is that what we're talking about, or what you guys are talking about so succinctly, is very similar to our review of the movie. We've reviewed this movie on the Figure podcast. We all gave it glowing reviews. We all really liked the movie. And we talked about many of these same points, but through the context of what the film is telling, what the scenes are telling you. And what I find so interesting is that we're getting the same thing from the music, almost as if the music is taken separately. Like, you remove the music from the movie, it's still telling the same story.
That's what it's supposed to do.
But that's what I'm talking about. But that's what I'm talking about, because we don't see that often anymore.
No, we don't. And well, I mean, this is why. I mean, not to get all radical on us, but like, this is why I feel like capitalism is destroying movies, because it just, like, you know, like, too many cooks. There's too many people deciding what the music is going to be in a movie. In fact, you know, again, not to get all political, but like, even Johnny Williams, you know, like, he doesn't write the way, not detriment to him. It's the way that the business element sort of controls it. He'll write, like, for Star Wars, he wrote some suites, and then it was kind of like chopped up and put together by the music editor. And it's not quite the same. He's not scoring the picture anymore. And, you know, I really just kind of blame the enormous corporate entity of Disney for being, you know, a little too controlling of their intellectual properties. But, you know, it's kind of a shame, because we're losing, not totally, because there's still lots of movies with great music, but at least in the sort of vertical integration, the monopolizing of blockbuster films, we're sort of losing the score. It's getting pushed further and further away from the focus. And not to say that it should be the focus. I mean, it should all be homogenous and working in concert with each other, pun not intended. But, you know, we don't get a lot of that, because a lot of times the music is really just like it's just treading water or like capturing a mood, but not really connecting dots. And
yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think another thing is that like the Batman, it's clear in the way that this film was made is made more the way that like films used to be 20 years ago, where the project is fully like has full resources and consideration dedicated to it. They're not necessarily like trying to pump it out to fill in a catalog.
Right.
And you can say that about, I think that applies to more than just the Disney films. I think that there's a lot of just like trying to pump out a lot of movies.
Yeah.
I think like most straight to streaming film scores are forgettable. Not all, but most.
I agree.
Because they're pumped into the system so fast.
Yeah. And this is a WB movie, right?
This is Warner Brothers.
Yeah. Warner Brothers is pretty famous for doing the same thing that Disney does. So I'm actually pretty surprised that this movie kind of escaped that.
I think a lot of it has to do with Matt Reeves, to be honest. I think Matt Reeves is one of those directors. I think him and Mangold are both James Mangold are both directors at this point in time where when you bring them onto a property, you leave them their time to cook on the project because you consider the final product to be artistic. Well, and I think studios for one reason or another, studios seem to give them that kind of consideration.
Sure, it's
artistic.
It's that release date mentality, right? Like James Gunn was talking about that when he brought up his new slate. Like companies so often set release dates. Okay, this movie is coming out this week. We need this movie to be done by that moment. Right. And you get that with like The Hobbit, right? The Hobbit is a good example. The Hobbit was being edited up until the release day. After the premiere of The Hobbit, it was still being edited. There was no final edit of The Hobbit until that movie dropped in theaters.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
so like because there's like too much material, we didn't edit enough.
Right, and like so like sometimes that has been known to work. There are other examples where like a movie is good and like, oh, we were actually editing up until the last minute. Okay, cool. Well, I'm glad that worked out for you, but other times it doesn't. And it's so often that these kind of ideas to hit these release dates, because you have to hit these quarterly earnings, you have to make this much in this month, and it's so detrimental to what filmmaking is meant to be. And like blockbusters, I get, have always kind of been this like idea of like, you know, these blockbusters are always supposed to make the biggest bang for your buck. We put the most money into them and we get the most money out of them. And that's kind of been the thing for like 30 years almost, maybe more.
Are you saying it's capitalism's fault? Is that what you're saying, Brandon? That maybe this is all to do with capitalism?
Well, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. But to bring it into what we're discussing here, and not necessarily trying to.
We don't live in a free market.
Trying not to get into too much of the politics, but keeping it centered to the discussion here. But like, you know, when you don't have to consider what release date this movie is going to hit, you get honestly a much better experience and a much better production experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And here we are thinking about the movie in depth because there was a priority on the art. Yeah.
I thought that for a moment Jeremy was about to go full Paul Dano and shout lies and corruption.
Don't worry, I plan on singing Ave Maria in its full entirety in the Latin at the end of the podcast, so stay tuned.
Fantastic. I think another thing to point out is just, who knows, but it's also possible that part of the reason this film comes out as polished and well thought out from an artistic sense as it does is the pandemic. We know that this movie was made throughout the pandemic. They knew they were making this movie. Like Giacchino was working on these themes before the pandemic happened, and then the movie wasn't even finished until long post the pandemic. So
there's more time for it to bake.
Yeah.
And also because he got such an early start, that release date mentality probably was a little less looming over the project in the music department. And they were able to use it in the marketing, which because it's such a like foreboding and predatory theme, very effective.
I'm so glad you brought that up. They dropped the theme, the Vengeance theme, the opening Vengeance theme in January, 2 months before this movie comes out. And it immediately becomes a top hit video of people people were interested in what's the Batman music going to be like, and just it grabbed people.
You know, you're right. It did grab people. You know, I had mentioned I teach, and one day I saw one of my students, and he came in and he sits down at the piano, and the first thing he says, "Dude, I learned the Batman theme." And inside my mind, because I'm an old person, I was like, "Oh, like the animated film or like the Tim Burton?" And then he sits down and goes, and I go, "Oh, of course it'd be the new Batman theme. What am I thinking of?" And then it struck me like, wow, you were interested enough in that theme to sit down and try and find it. I know it's only 2 notes, so it probably didn't take very long, but like it stuck in your mind. I've never heard anybody, you know, to pull from earlier, come to me and say, "Look, I learned the Thor theme," you know, like because they don't care. The Batman theme was interesting enough in those 2 notes, and especially in that trailer, that it left an impression, and people hum it. The person that I learned composition from, or the master classes that I took, he showed this video in one of his videos of his like young son, who's like 2 or 3 at the time, and he was playing Knight Rider, and he was like playing with the toys, and then he did like some little stunt, and he ran away humming the theme, and he used it as an example to be like, "Look, I didn't teach him the Knight Rider theme. He just was using it in a moment of play because it stuck with him as like, this is the adventure theme, and now I'm Knight Rider." And when themes really stick with people, it happens that early, when like kids are just like, they don't even have a concept of like the relationship between music and film. They're just like da, 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 you know, like I can remember doing like the Indiana Jones theme or the Star Wars theme, like humming it as I played, because it was, I wanted to feel like the characters, and those themes were representative of those characters.
You know what that reminds me of? Did you guys ever see Disney's Lone Ranger movie with Johnny Depp and Armie Hammer?
No.
Oh, I did not.
Okay, so that film is not good. It's a terrible movie. But
that's what I've heard.
But here's the thing. At the end of that movie, the last act of that movie, the theme song for the Lone Ranger plays. It's the only time that theme plays in the movie. In the whole movie, the Lone Ranger theme song plays. And I gotta tell you, man, it is the most spectacular 20 minutes I saw that year, because the theme song was playing.
Wait a minute, but did they not use it in the rest of the movie?
No, it's just in the last 20 minutes, and it's so much. And the last 20 minutes of the movie have such a much better energy. The whole movie changes because that theme song played, and like I was like, oh shit, this is great now. Where was this the whole movie?
Missed opportunity, right? They didn't see it as valuable to the characters or the adventure of it. They saw it as like a, you know, like an Easter egg, like fan service. Yeah. Oh, here's the theme. But like it's integral to your connection to the characters in a movie. It's what decorates the character and allows the abstraction of the conversation with their, like what's going on in their mind, to be transferred to the audience. It's part of it. Like, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on, the subtext in the writing, the way the actors are performing their characters, but also the way the music relates you to those characters. It's all working in concert with itself. And when one of those elements is removed, and we're seeing a lot of that in movies, when the music is removed, then you feel less of a connection to the characters. It's just that simple.
Yeah.
So going back and talking about the Batman's true calling, or the Gotham theme, whichever way you want to look at it, you mentioned like it's in the motorcycle separating scene. So it comes in right when Selina says that that you're spoken for. That's why you're not going to leave. Mm-hmm. And that's when it starts. I think it's so fascinating, not just that it's there, but that we end on that sound and not the vengeance theme. The theme, like what would arguably have been the theme for the overall film. We end there, not with, you know, the comeback in of like when he turns his face away from her on the motorcycle, you kind of expect a little bit of the dun, 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 like very triumphant or something, but they don't do it.
No, it does happen in the bells. The vengeance.
Sure.
Theme. It does. It's a hint, and I think the reason that it's in there.
But you know, real quick, you know what I mean. You know what I mean. Like other films would generally just like push it up. It's subtle and it's behind what we're talking about.
And that's why I was relating those themes to each other, the Vengeance theme and the Gotham theme, is that not only are they connected in a melodic sense, but also like thematically to the movie, it's showing that growth in the character. It's not where we started with. It's in there. And Giacchino makes it clear that theme is connected to it. But by the end of the movie, we're on a different theme because the character's grown. Oh, that's how it should happen. That's how we should do music in movies. Anyway. But, that's what made me really like start digging in and looking further into the score, because if you're thinking about it on that level, what else is in that score? And there's so much in this score to talk about. We barely even started talking about it. I've got so many notes on my phone, you guys. It's like the Ave Maria, the Nirvana song, even. Shit, let's talk about the Nirvana song for a second, because that thing, oh wait, yeah. Do you recognize that it's bum, ba, bum, bum? It's the same theme. Something in the Way is the same, but slightly different to the Vengeance theme. And I think it's really interesting that they play it when Bruce makes eye contact with the now orphaned child, but he's also a rich kid, just like Bruce Wayne was. It's like, look, we're using the same cadence. It's a little different. Like, if you want to get technical about it, the Vengeance theme is quarter, eighth, quarter. And Something in the Way is like, yeah, quarter, eight, quarter. Just a scramble of it. It's like, it's almost the exact same thing, but it's like the same theme for a different person. You know what I mean? And it's like they're using that song when they make eye contact with each other to like establish Bruce thinking internally like, oh, you're going through something really similar to me, huh? It's not the same thing. You haven't landed on the Vengeance theme like I have, but it's the same cadence. It's the same feeling.
So the music supervisor, George Draculius, he's the one who brings all the non-score pieces to the film. So Something in the Way by Nirvana is brought to the table by him. And so you have to assume, we don't know a hard answer on this, but you have to assume that he hears Giacchino's theme.
Because it was early.
And finds, yes, because it was very early, and finds Something in the Way to go with it. And it just, there might have been other suggestions that Matt Reeves chose from. But this follows the theme rather than the reverse. They weren't trying to match Something in the Way. Something in the Way worked with what was already being constructed by Giacchino.
It's one of the few times that I've actually really liked just like a piece of music that's not connected to the film being integrated into the film, because it was done with what seemed like careful consideration. I don't know the whole process, like I didn't even know that the music supervisor picked it, but they must have been in collaboration with each other. They must have had a conversation about it.
Generally, like we again don't know that was the situation on this one, but generally what will happen with a music supervisor is like they'll bring pieces to the director, not usually the composer as much, and say like, hey, does this, so there might have been options.
Sure.
And they both kind of came to this one because of its connection to what Giacchino was already building. And on another note, I really love what Giacchino does it's the whole moment with the helicopter and his final narration for the movie, and Something in the Way comes back.
Yeah.
And Giacchino fills some stuff behind it over, like slowly progressing under it to give it that heroic ending.
Yeah. You could even go out on a limb and say that it was not intentional, but subconsciously you could hear the connection. Like, it's like that phenomenon where like you'll be listening to a song and you'll be like, oh, this reminds me of X, and maybe you don't have the music theory knowledge to understand it, but you're like, man, I can hear that song go into this song, or it sounds just like this song or something. And it's because there's only 12 notes, so there's a lot of crossover between music. So it could have happened unconsciously. It could have been a conversation, but there is a connection between those two songs. And it's really easy to spot when you're looking for it.
Right.
So it's just an interesting moment. I wanted to kind of like touch on like all the musical moments in here. Let me get my notes open again so I can pull from that.
Shall we do this in pieces? I think maybe talk about all the uses of a theme section. So we've got three big ones. Like you've talked the Vengeance theme. It's the largest because it's all over this movie. Ave Maria and the Riddler's
scene.
Yes, Ave Maria and the Riddler's theme, and then Selina's theme. Where would you like to go next, Jeremy?
Well, let's see. We've done quite a bit with the Vengeance theme and connecting
and
it.
Yet there's still more.
There's still more. I think that. Oh, hang on. What was this? Oh yeah, no, that's. Yeah, let's move on to the Ave Maria because I think let's talk about that in depth a little bit. We touched on it briefly, and talking about how it's diegetic, non-diegetic, but also. There's something I didn't even think I was going to mention in the podcast, but I think that it's worth talking about. The Ave Maria is the only theme that's provided for a character that's not an original piece of music. There is this sort of the discordant version, but it's not an original piece. It's its own piece. And if you view that decision under the lens that the Riddler is a psychopath, it kind of fits in the sense that like his theme is not authentic to him. It's a mask he wears, especially when you take into consideration the fact that it's both diegetic and non-diegetic. He knows that that's his theme. He sings it at some point. So the fact that it's not an original piece, it's something taken from another source and established for him, is really interesting in correlation with his character, which is very focused on masks.
So the tracking on this seems to be that they Matt Reeves did have a little interview talking about Giacchino making the score, and during part of it he says that they knew they were doing the orphanage background for Riddler, right. And that when Renewal was brought to the table and he was there, he was doing the boys choir singing right. Ave Maria.
The hell is that?
And the character becomes trapped in right. that part of his life, and thus Ave Maria becomes the defining sound of him, because he's caught in that moment.
It's like, and that's exactly because I was going to touch on the exact same story about how he was like trapped in that, and it is sort of eerily reminiscent of the way that. Like when you like study into serial killers, like the way that they establish like masks to fit into society, it's similar. It has that same sort of like, the je ne sais quoi. I can't really quite put my finger on it because
a certain je ne sais quoi.
Yeah, something in the way that they chose that music. But
that kind of also goes to like, he looks at Batman as a kindred figure, almost like he modeled himself after what he thinks Batman is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of creating that theme around him, that theme that's not quite Ave Maria, but it is Ave Maria. The idea of like, he thinks he's Batman. He thinks he's helping Batman. And he's like, we've been doing this together. And so like he has this, so like that theme kind of represents that, right? Like he's not right in the head because he doesn't quite see what Batman is really doing. He himself has perverted what he thinks Batman is doing and puts on the mask like he's Batman, but he's not Batman. He's like a perverted Batman.
Right. I think that's very apt, what you said there, Brandon. I also want to go back to something Jeremy mentioned much earlier, which is the use of Ave Maria in the funeral, because Ave Maria is used really well, and Ave Maria and then the Riddler's theme twisted out of it is used really well in two specific moments that I want to highlight, which is one is the funeral. When they're going to the mayor's funeral, you're hearing Ave Maria, and at first you don't see the choir, so you don't know if it's diegetic or non-diegetic, and thus you are like, okay, so Riddler's here, which is the same thing that Bruce is doing. Bruce is looking in the crowd of people and wondering, is this the Riddler? Is this the Riddler? This is a person who tried to move. This is a person who's complaining about stuff. Is that the Riddler? And then he sees the choir, and so it's like, okay, I guess the Riddler's not here, or at least it's not obvious. And I think that's really effective. But the one that really gets me about the Riddler's theme that I love so much, and like watching it this time is when I really not noticed it, but appreciated it, is when Ave Maria is like just building up out of control and dominating the entire space as Bruce is standing in front of the Riddler in jail and hearing him say Bruce Wayne.
They'll remember both of us. Bruce Wayne.
Because to Bruce's mind, it's the Riddler saying he knows. And until the moment where Bruce finds out that he doesn't know, it is like the villain has come to roost. He's got everything, really giving the juiciest stuff of the Riddler's theme to that moment, because that's what Bruce is afraid is happening.
Right.
And then the moment that he finds out that that's not true, it dissipates away.
But oh no. Let's talk about the billionaire with the lying dead daddy, because at least the money makes it go down easy, doesn't it? Bruce Wayne. He's the only one we didn't get.
Right. It's almost like that's the first piece of the puzzle in like Bruce Wayne's cognitive behavioral therapy, and then the next piece is when he hears the reflection of "I'm vengeance" in the sniper. Right. It's like, oh, it clicked, and that's when then he makes a decision to change what he's going to do in his path. Yeah, great use of music in this movie, just throughout, and like. Paul Dano really sells that character. Oh my God. Robert Pattinson too. Robert Pattinson, I should say. I can't believe that hasn't come up. And if we don't call this episode Robert Pattinson, I'm quitting.
First episode, you're already quitting.
Well, that's it. We didn't call it Robert Pattinson.
So there's a podcast that I listened to called The Weekly Planet, and they were trying to figure out, okay, well, it's Batfleck. What's Robert Pattinson? They said Pattinson, and then eventually it evolved into Robat Battenbat.
Oh God, that's next level. I'm down here. They're on another planet of existence. Jeez.
And you can actually buy a shirt that says Robat Battenbat.
Has anyone ever been decided as to want to go look more like whatever the hell it is?
That was pretty much it.
All right. But yeah, I think Dano is great. I think using the Ave Maria theme. And here's the thing. So like I come to film scores as just kind of like I like film scores, but I don't know a lot about film scores, and I wish that weren't true, but it is. And so like I come here and I'm like,
and it's easy, it's simple. Come on.
Of course, but like what the thing is like all of this is still happening to me. What you guys are talking about, this is all subconsciously happening to me while I'm watching the movie. And so as you guys are talking about this, I'm having like revelation after revelation after revelation of like, oh right, that's what I was thinking. This is because Ave Maria. Because when you're watching the movie, the funeral scene. And what I really like about the funeral scene is like, oh, and you can feel the Riddler's presence there. But like I don't have the knowledge or the kind of like experience to say why I feel the Riddler is there. But as you mentioned, like it's because Ave Maria is playing. Oh, right. That's why I think the Riddler is in this scene, because that's what music is meant to do. It's supposed to help you feel the same way that the characters are feeling.
Brendan, you're talking about very beautifully, in fact, how music works, especially in a film context. And like I was saying, it's conveying an abstract, and it's doing so with sound. But even if you don't know the language of music, if the music is successful, you are still getting an impression of that abstraction inside. Like that, you're still getting it. You don't need the knowledge of music theory to connect with the music, and that's when it's done well. That's the beauty of it. And this movie did it splendidly.
This is why I wrote down when I was taking notes that the good scores make you feel something.
Yes,
because music can make you feel something, and a good one will do it. The great scores make you feel something with the character. And this is a great score. I think Giacchino does such a good job. He establishes up front that he's going to trust the audience to recognize his music, because it's the beginning, it's the vengeance theme. You are filling in the blanks of feeling like Batman is there, which is what the characters that you're seeing on screen are supposed to think, even if Batman isn't there. Yeah. You go back to the funeral scene. It's not just Ave Maria with the Riddler. It's also moments before that when Falcone shows up. Yes. And he sees a boot step out of the car, and we hear Selina's theme. So we are meant to think, just like Bruce, that that's Selina, and Selina is there up until the moment that he knows that she isn't.
Right. In a way, the music sometimes, especially when it's done effectively, is sort of spoiling things for the audience, but not really, because it's counting on the fact that the audience doesn't have the knowledge of a music theory composer or whatnot. But it's spoiling, kind of like an anime intro, showing everything and all the characters and all their fights in an intro before the first episode, so you kind of have an idea of like who all the players are in the show. In the same way, the music, when the score is done properly, like giving you a hint of a theme when a character steps out. I want to say that's before we find out that Falcone is Selina's father.
Right, but that's not.
What? Go ahead.
But that's not the point. Is he knows there's a connection between them, and so Bruce is expecting that to be Selina. And what all of these bits that we're talking about, whether it's the Ave Maria at the funeral, Selina's theme at the funeral, or the Riddler's theme in Bruce for Bruce as he thinks that the Riddler is saying, "I know you're Bruce Wayne," it's putting you in his head. Yeah. It's saying, like, this is what he thinks. He believes that is Selina up until the very second when he finds out it isn't. He believes the Riddler is at the funeral up until the point where he starts to disavow that belief.
And what's interesting, though, is that, like, he's not wrong when that theme plays and Falcone steps out. It's like, oh, I guess I was wrong. But he wasn't. They are connected. And that theme being connected to Selina in transitively is connected to Falcone because he's her father. So like it kind of in that way, what you're saying, because Bruce Wayne's a detective, it's putting yourself in his head, but in a very layered way, because he's got the pieces to the puzzle. He's trying to figure it out, and you're supposed to be following along with him, going, "Oh yeah, I guess that's not Selina," but like both the audience and the character were both closer than they thought, by hearing that theme.
What's so interesting about this movie is that, this is really the first time that we spent, inside Bruce Wayne's head, like as a detective, Batman's head. We don't really do that in Batman movies, and I've always wanted them to. And like to a certain degree, say what you will about The Dark Knight, I don't think it's a very good detective movie. I still don't know what the hell he's trying to do with that brick, but like I think that the Batman movies don't often put you in Bruce Wayne's head. And what's so instrumental about doing that in this movie is through the music. The music, like I said before, like it almost feels like Giacchino was in the writing staff, like talking about this movie, writing this movie with the people writing it. And because like, if we're going to do a noir detective film, we need to be in Bruce's head. We need to learn. We need to be thinking what Bruce is thinking. We need to be doing, and what you're talking about with like Selina, the film does, yes. It's clearly Selina's boot. It's clearly Selina's boot that walks out of that, and you're like, okay, that's Selina, but her theme plays at the same time. And so it creates this idea of like, okay, we're with you, Bruce. Yes, that's Selina Kyle. Let's be on that detective journey with you in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of times, bring up Dark Knight as an example. The music can sometimes be effective, but still divorced from the characters. An example that I can think of is Joker's theme in Dark Knight is a single note being played on a cello with a lot of bow pressure, and it's just meant to sound kind of. Hans Zimmer said he wanted it to annoy people. He wanted it to be, upsetting because it's just a single note and it's played in this kind of like screechy, scratchy kind of way. Now that is very reminiscent of the character of the Joker. It's kind of like chaotic. It's saying, you expect a theme from me, right? I'm a single note, that's very Joker, but it's also not getting you into the mind of the Joker in any scenes. It doesn't have enough capability to do that. It's just there to set a tone and to be a mood. And I haven't studied the score and I haven't really watched the movie in a bit. So like I'm probably missing a lot of details there, but just speaking hypothetically, a lot of times the music is divorced from the inside of the characters because it's really just trying to set a mood or set a tone. This movie, by way of what they were trying to do, absolutely demanded that the music convey what's going on in the characters' heads. And so just by, way of what they were trying to accomplish with the movie, they ended up doing what you're supposed to do with music in movies. It's just what you're supposed to do.
Well, there's lot.
It's like they reinvented the wheel.
Right. They came to the same conclusions that are like written down in a book.
Yeah. Sorry, Sparks.
No, it's okay. There's a lot of thinking that is clearly present in this film, that a decent chunk of it is structured the same way that like good detective and noir scores are constructed. It's especially, I'll say, the quote unquote quieter versions of the vengeance theme when he's doing detective work and how that's placed in. Selina's theme itself is born out of this like quieter, again, kind of version of the vengeance theme when he's following her, and then it starts to bloom into Selina's theme. And Selina's theme is formed in this noirish flavor out of Bruce's interpretation of watching her. It starts gentle and seductive, and then it ends with her leaping out of the window with that big flourish. And I think that's like it. You feel it like build into this. What is Bruce's idea of her? And it's like, oh, she's very kind. Oh, she's kind of sexy. All of these things that turn into what is Selina's theme for the rest of the movie.
Right. It's music from the perspective of Bruce Wayne, which is
right.
Very apt to say so, because her theme is very ambiguous, right? The strings going like, like the high notes. It doesn't have a strong melodic core to it. There is a melody in there, absolutely, but it's definitely a mystery. It's right. Meant to sound like all those elements that you described, but it doesn't have like a swell. It doesn't have like a true like resolution either. Like the resolution is very intense.
It gets closer to the swell because when we get to later, it gets to what I called the most romantic use of it, which is when Bruce stops her from shooting Falcone, and he says, "You don't have to pay with him."
Yes.
And right after he says that line, you hear like a little bit stronger on the strings, a lot more like there is almost a swell.
He has to pay!
You don't have to pay with him. You paid enough.
Almost a swell for something that is turning into real love between the two of them. That's like what it's supposed to kind of sound like. But because, that's where you get to later. But when you're first introduced to her, it's what I said with how it builds. And then you hear it come back when he's in the mayor's room with her, because he follows her and he pulls her in from the cop. And it starts to be, again, like that kind of seductive sound to it as they're held against each other. And then it becomes this more gentle, slow, sorrowful version in the moment after that, when they go back to her place and find it ransacked and her friend taken.
Right.
And so it gives you this full range of everything Bruce thinks about Selina in those 3 beats across this large scene.
We're just good friends. Just real close friends.
But I really love the noir sound that they give to her. Her theme in particular sounds ripped out of like classic noir. And I really like, again, that really romantic almost swell with it when it's getting into the third act. I thought that was really great.
Yeah, what's interesting to me is that like there's no combining of their themes. Not like at the end, there's no like climactic love moment where like the theme like swells. And like I was watching Pirates of the Caribbean. I was watching a clip of Pirates of the Caribbean 5, the worst one. And it's this moment when Will and Elizabeth's love theme from the third movie kicks in. It's big and it's powerful, and it's like they embrace for the first time in years, and it's like it makes you feel like, oh, they're in love. There's nothing like that in this movie. And I like that because like it's not meant to be. That their story isn't meant to be this like big epic love story. They're kind of at odds, and Bruce doesn't really know why for a lot of the movie.
In fact, in a way, I would say that my initial reaction to their kiss was almost uncomfortable. It was a kind of a twinge of toxicity in there because like there's not really much room for romance in this situation. And it's kind of played off that way in the music too, right? Because it never does reach what you're saying, that kind of like romantic element. It's always, it's within the color palette of deliberation and detective work still, even when they are getting kind of romantic with each other, it's still tense. There's a tension because, well, we know that would not be a happy ending. There's no room for it.
you could make an argument that the score is aware of how it's never Bruce Wayne coming to Selina. It's always Batman.
Yeah.
It's always the vengeance theme before he interacts with her. Again, the exception being at the end when she says you're spoken for. And that's when we start to get the Bat's True Calling, Gotham Bruce Wayne kind of theme. But up to that point, she calls him vengeance. The vengeance theme is all around her theme whenever he's interacting with her. It's never his whole self, but he knows Selina.
I just thought of something too. It's kind of like that. The vengeance theme is the wedge, the distance between them.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that when the vengeance theme grows out into the Gotham theme, it's when they're putting physical distance between each other.
Yeah.
Right.
kind of cool. There's a lot of moments forever in this movie. Yes.
Hey guys, I think this is a good movie.
I think it might be pretty good. There's a lot to say for sure, and like it or not, having this much to say about the artistic decisions within a movie just automatically makes it a good movie to me. You know what I mean? It's like there's enough to talk about. It's good.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's so that final note, I can't get over. Like, again, I know you brought up like the vengeance theme is still worked in there, but like the more dominant theme is the one you just played on the piano.
Right.
The fact that that's how you end the movie, it's just so, I think, emblematic of how smart Giacchino is with knowing what a film is actually about and what he's supposed to be conveying with the score, rather than giving into, well, a blockbuster movie would have you walk out with the Batman theme prominently in your head in the last shot.
Yeah.
The overall stick in your ear vengeance theme.
Yeah.
Real quick, I did want to make a note just acknowledging what Brandon said earlier, the sacrilege about the Pirates 5 clip that he was bringing up. That's a good example of score doing literally all of the work. Because I watched him share that clip again on Twitter, and I looked at it and I'm like, this is shot terribly. It looks awful. There's nothing good about this except for the score, and it's not even an original score for the film.
Yeah.
So
I mentioned that like modern movies are getting more minimalistic, and I mean it in this in the way where it's minimalistic in structure, but not in the sense that there's not enough music. In fact, I think too much music gets written for a lot of modern movies.
sure.
And that's an example too, where like it just feels like shoved in, like, oh, we need that in there, but it wasn't connected to anything else in the film, right? Like they don't really play much with Elizabeth and Will's theme in the movie, right?
Right.
No, and like the thing is, like I think we should definitely do an episode on at least one of the Pirates films, and I think that'd be fantastic, because I think Pirates of the Caribbean 3 is probably Hans Zimmer's masterpiece, but I want to talk about something that you mentioned with like the minimalistic thing. Oftentimes what blockbusters will do is fill in music because they think music needs to be there, but sometimes music doesn't. And what's really cool about the Batman is that it sometimes doesn't have music.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't overwhelm the audience with its musical scores. When Batman first walks into the Iceberg Lounge, there's no music outside of the diegetic music, the techno music playing in the club. It doesn't, like, he punches the dude and the dun dun dun. That doesn't happen. He punches the dude, walks in, and then that
later too as an echo, because they play with that scene. They do it 3 times, right?
Yeah, and what's so interesting is that like this movie knows when to pull back, when you don't need the theme playing right now.
So there's a process in the composition of a movie. It's called spotting. It's where the composer theoretically sits down with the director and they decide where the music is going to be and make edits and whatnot and stuff. And a lot of times, especially with the too many cooks, too many people talking about like in the sound department for a movie, I think that the spotting gets kind of messy. It's really what happens. I think Giacchino being so closely involved with Reeves in the making of this movie, the spotting was immaculate. And a lot of times it's not that there's too much music in the movie. It's that the music is not connected. So it sounds like more than it is, because if you just heard a piece, and then in the next scene, there's a totally new piece that's not connected to the last piece. You now have to digest a whole new piece of music with its own color palette and all this stuff. And every time that happens, it's another meal for you to digest. When you have one theme that is layered throughout a movie like this one, it's a lot less to digest, and so it becomes less burdensome on the audience. And you can get away with having a lot more music with just like a couple of themes. And this is just like my one of my biggest problems with so many movies is like you just get just so many thundering drums, just every possible percussion sample out there, just riding away, just like all day, and then you get these big horns and big strings, and nothing makes sense, and like it's all just every scene is just like a whole new piece of music, and it just becomes draining. It's exhausting to listen to music like that.
Sure.
This movie actually has quite a bit of music, but it's like 3 things, so it's really easy to take in.
So there's like,
go ahead.
I was gonna say there's like 4 or 5 pieces and moments that don't use, or at least really, really don't feature prominently, the Riddler, the Vengeance, the Selina, or the Bat's True Calling. One of them is the music that comes in once, and it's a long ways into the scene of silence, but it's when Bruce is with Alfred at the hospital.
Oh, that's a great scene.
Yeah, and it comes in at the end, and it's not creating anything theme, not a standout thing, just a lovely little piece that fits the moment between Bruce and Alfred, of him confessing his fear of losing Alfred.
Losing somebody I care about.
And if I'm not mistaken, because I wrote a note down, but I forgot to write enough note for that scene. That, like you said, doesn't use any of the main themes from the movie, right?
Not a one.
It's just underscore. But because the other themes are so developed and so fleshed out and used throughout the rest of the movie, it's not overwhelming to include just a brief little moment of underscore just to highlight the scene and just move on from it. That happens in music, and it's not to say that it's disengaging from the structure of the overall movie because it's not connected. It's connected in the sense that we need music there because it fits the scene, but we don't have a theme for Alfred and Bruce. And probably if you had a theme for Alfred and Bruce, it would get a little lopsided in the score.
It is pretty much keeping itself to the same instruments as the Bat's True Calling. It's not going beyond that, but it's not using the sound of the Bat's True Calling.
And actually, that's a technique that composers will implement when they have to write without a theme that they've been reusing. Is just using the same instruments, because what it does is it, to the audience, is almost the same thing. Right? They can hear those instruments and go, oh, we're in that world. We're in that mood.
Sure. And then a place where it's the opposite of that, but I think it works really well, is when Selina tells the story to Bruce about her mom. Mm-hmm. And it plays a harp. It's not playing Selina's theme. It's playing a harp.
What though? In Selina's theme, the harp is the undercurrent of the whole theme, right? Those high portamento strings, but it's like arpeggiated harps. So again, taking from the color palette, it it's reminiscent without being the focus, without being the main character, right? Because what is a theme doing? It's communicating to the audience something that is going on within the mind of the characters. Usually that's what's going on, right? And so sometimes if the character is saying what they're feeling, you don't need the music to also say it. That would be redundant. But it's like the voice becomes the melodic main instrument, the leader, and then the harp is just the thing that was supporting the melody when we were hearing the melody instead of the voice. Now it's just supporting her voice instead. It's like, that's the technique being used there.
Yeah.
Something that I think is often lost when it comes to modern scores is that they don't get. There's nothing that you want to listen to after the movie, really. I did a list of Michael Giacchino. I've loved him for years, but I did a list for Screen Rant, ranking his 10 best scores. And I think that and I listened because of that. I was listening to I have his thing on Spotify. I just had that on shuffle, and it just played a bunch of his music. And I pretty much pick out what every piece of music was from, just by having that on shuffle. And I think that's what he does so well. He doesn't always, he's such a varied composer. He doesn't often use the same thing over and over again. He often will change his sound to match the film. His stuff with Pixar is very different than here in the Batman. Tomorrowland, you won't hear the Tomorrowland theme in The Incredibles, right? Even though they kind of have similar themes going on in those movies. And I think that's something that's really cool about Giacchino, is that you can listen to him after you watch the movie. You can listen to his soundtracks on your drive away from the movie.
So he has a history in doing big band jazz arrangements, which is why The Incredibles is so good, because he knows how to do that.
Yeah.
And let's see, what I was going to say is usually people who have a history in jazz are really, really good composers because jazz is where you find all of those interesting dissonances and harmonic colors that make tension in a melody possible, or make a melody flexible enough to have different kinds of tensions. John Williams is a jazz guy, and I don't know if you've ever listened to any of his early stuff, real early stuff. He released jazz solo albums. Boy, that man can play piano. Whoa. And, he played the recorded piano performance in the West Side Story movie. And he did some stuff with Henry Mancini as a piano player before he was a composer, right? I mean, he was always a composer, but, he dropped out. I don't want to say dropped out, but he stopped trying to be a recital pianist when he was intimidated by other piano players, which is silly because he's John Williams. But, he started with jazz. And a lot of times, a lot of modern composers do not know much about jazz, and it's very evident. I don't want to name names because I don't want to step on anybody's toes or anything. But there's a lot of modern composers that just don't have any history with that, and it really makes the pieces less flexible. Anyway, but I wanted to say something about Michael Giacchino, which is really just super niche and specific. But I have to say it because I don't know where else to say it. So obviously, if you listen to this show, you've heard Suburban Proctologist or heard of it to some degree. Michael Giacchino did the music for the Medal of Honor games. And when I was doing that, when we were doing the episode, when we were originally doing Recordings of an English Jackass, the first podcast, we did that episode, Antoine in the Shadow of Nefarious Part 2. And I just shamelessly just used the music from Medal of Honor, the Medal of Honor game that I had, because I had the files on my computer from installing the game. So I layered that in, and it became the framework of the episode was using the music from that game. Years later, I'd find out it was Giacchino and ended up becoming a fan of his. But there was a piece of that. It's in the Medal of Honor game. And it was used in a moment in the episode. And years later, I would go back and go, I'm going to steal that. And it became what I've been using as Prako's theme in the show. It's just, that's his theme. And so I ripped off Michael Giacchino just because I used his music earlier. but it was not a theme. It was just like a stab within the game. I just turned it into a theme.
Sure.
But it's weird because like that music, the Medal of Honor music, is so different from The Incredibles, so different from Space Mountain, my favorite Michael Giacchino piece.
Sure, yeah.
Or the Batman. He has a way of slipping into so many different masks that a lot of modern composers can't do. There's not many of them that I really love a lot. I like John Powell a lot. I like Danny Elfman. But there's not too many modern composers I'm super into, because most of them have a sound that's just this is me, and that's it. That's what they do. It's like pop stars.
What's the composer for Free Guy?
Christoph Beck.
Christoph Beck. I like Christoph Beck, but really the Paperman theme is like his signature thing.
Oh, I know that name, Christoph Beck. Who did he do? Did he do WandaVision? No.
No.
But he did do Ant-Man and the Wasp just recently, Quantumania. That's Christoph Beck.
Is that really?
I haven't seen that yet, but I haven't heard good things.
I liked it.
Well,
I want to circle back on the Vengeance theme, because I think that's where the bulk of anything else we have to say about this that we haven't covered is. I wanted to get across that I think, we talked about him being in the shadows, the way that feels. When we're first introduced to his theme, when I was watching it this time, I made a statement that I think the Vengeance theme is almost the heartbeat of Gotham.
Mm-hmm.
Like at the time, again, going back to the idea that I said that Gotham City is full of predators. And so it has this kind of menacing feel to it with the Vengeance theme. And because it feels like that belongs to Gotham at the same time that it belongs to the Batman in the way that we're seeing it, the Gotham that we're seeing. And I likened it when it starts picking up a little later into the film to it's this March of Justice idea. People have compared, to the Imperial March. It has this March of Justice sound that I think kind of blends in with Gordon in his use a lot. When he goes to turn off the bat signal is a good moment where I feel like it has this very it's got kind of a march beat to it.
It is a march. Oh, funny that you should mention that, because I had a thing to say about you in talking about how it's a march. So marches typically are in the time signature 4/4, so 1, 2, 3, 4. And going back to the Gotham theme, it's in 6/8. So is Ave Maria, by the way. And that's a totally different rhythm. It's really difficult to connect one rhythm to another, unless you kind of know what you're doing. But especially to our ears, it's hard to hear 4 and 6 as being the same thing, because they're counted very differently. So I think it's really interesting that and I don't really have much to say on this. I just wanted to bring it up because there was nowhere else to say it, that the Vengeance theme is a march in 4/4, and that when it grows into the Gotham theme, Bats True Calling, whatever you want to call it, it takes on a different time signature. He still managed to hide right before the swell in the Bats True Calling piece. So even though this is in 4, he worked out the math, he did the subdivision right so that it landed on the right beats and still retained its shape. And I think that I wrote down a thing about the significance of it being in 6/8, which is that a different rhythm. Oh shoot, where was it? Oh yeah. It obscures it from the original Batman theme, right? Because our ears are tuned into a different rhythm. So it's meant to feel like a totally different thing. In fact, so much so that the first time I watched the movie, that theme, the Gotham theme, I didn't hear its connection to anything. And I thought, kind of a missed opportunity that they didn't use the Batman theme at the end of the movie and just kind of injected a whole new thing. And that was my first impression was, it just feels totally like a new thing. And I wasn't super hyped about it. But when I listened to it a few times more, I was like, wait a minute, this is the same thing. They just changed the time signature. So the different rhythm grants it a more uplifting feeling. The 6/8 is very, that's a very uplifting kind of rhythm. And, very different from a march, which is kind of imposing. I think that the Vengeance theme sounds like heavy boot steps.
For sure.
Thick, shadowy footsteps, and then the upliftingness of the 6/8 just like totally dismisses all of that march sound, but with the same melody. So it's like they were trying to remove Giacchino was trying to remove the march, the imposition from the theme, while still retaining the melodic component and how it develops out of that. So just like I said, I didn't have much to say on it, but it's just interesting that they did it. And I don't know the significance of the connection to Ave Maria also being in 6/8. Maybe he learned from that experience and the 6/8ness of it, imbued itself in his new theme. I don't know. You could go off on a tangent and just point to your colored string wall about it, but very interesting.
We're about an hour and a half in, and we haven't talked about the chase.
Oh man, the chase is so good.
Which is an incredible scene. But what the score is doing, this is the part where like my comparison, probably you had the same thing, Jeremy, of like Batman is the shark in this movie.
Yes.
It came to like full fruition. I'm like the Batmobile, the car is an extension of Batman, and thus a amplified extension of his theme. This yes. Far more like, heavy hitting, loud, big version.
One thing that Giacchino loves to do, I've noticed it in several of his movies, and I don't know how much this is Giacchino, but it has to be in some part his design because it's in multiple movies that he scored, and it's not always Reeves directing. The sound design, the sound effects sometimes sync up musically with the score. The scene in that, or the moment in that scene when they go through the cones or like the things on the side of the road that are it's rhythmic with the drums. They act as tom drums. There's another moment where a car horn goes off in the same key as Ave Maria, hitting the high note. There's multiple moments in this movie. I wrote a couple of them down.
When I noticed it specifically when the Batmobile skids and you see the wheels lock and go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Another moment from another movie in Rogue One, the lightsabers are playing with the melody. When Darth Vader is cutting the rebels down on the blockade runner. The lightsaber is playing in rhythm and in harmony with the piece, like boom, 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 boom. It's like it's in it, and it's something that is really unique. I don't hear a lot of. I think I would say the other time I can point to it in a modern movie would be in Amazing Spider-Man 2 or 1, which is the one with Jamie Foxx as Electro.
That's 2.
Yeah, it's used in that, but I think it's a little bit more like obviously used there, like it's like part of his theme is like controlling like the like substations and stuff, and it's mixed in. But in Giacchino's movies, it tends to be just like almost like random, but not random. It's like in really high tense moments in the movies is when that happens, and I don't know the significance of it, but it's cool. I love it.
Yeah, it's really unique.
I did try to watch the movie in its entirety before we recorded this. I only got about 3/4 of the way through. It's a long movie, guys.
It's a long movie, yeah.
And but I made sure like one time I was like, oh, I really got to go to bed, so I'll just watch. I'll just get to the chase scene. I'm just gonna get to the chase scene because like that scene is so great.
It's really fun.
When Oz is like, oh, I got you, and he bursts out of the flame. Oh man.
Especially because that was the thing that was used prominently in the marketing, was that final shot of him walking towards the upside down car and stuff with the ba 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 ba. That's sort of the climax of that impending doom of the vengeance theme. Like the payoff from the initial trailer is getting to that scene in the movie. So
the theme kind of knows it too, with the way that it does this heavy triumphant sound for it. The vengeance theme never gets, I think, much bigger than it does in that moment.
It's because it adds the fifth. So it's not just it has the extra energy in there. Right. that extra harmony. It's really powerful.
There's a something they do is they're using these shrill hit sounds that come in when the penguin is walking up on Selina just before the car revs up, and that is worked into the chase piece. It's used. I'm not gonna say it's Oz's theme, but it's used for seeing Oz in the chase, and he gets this really restricted sounding version when he's trapped in the semis. Which I really like.
Listen to it because I can't picture the thing you're talking about, but I trust that it's in there. That's cool. Do you know what instrument was doing that?
No, God, no. I was hoping that you would know what I'm talking about.
If you picture it, I could tell you. I can't think of it. I can picture a lot of that piece of music, but mostly just like the energy of it. I can't really find that instrument in my head.
Just trust that Giacchino does a really good job of narrowing the sound down to make it feel like you are feeling the restriction that Oz is feeling, trapped between the semis and behind the semi in that moment, and knowing the Batman is coming up on him, and it's mixing in the Batman, the vengeance theme as he's approaching and all that.
Oh, it creates such a good tension. Like you were talking about how Batman is seen like Jaws, like that moment of like this is Jaws' victim, just about ready to get the jaws, as it were,
right.
And like you feel it tense like Oz, because you're like, oh shit, he's coming.
Yeah. Oh, it's very tense. I think, especially with the buildup of seeing the car, and it's so well staged. You hear the car, you see the car, zooms in on the car. You go back to Oz, looking at the car, go back to the car, and everybody's like, and then, blah, 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 it's so heavy. The car revving up, the car turning on immediately and revving up, like you're not quite sure if that's score or not. Yes, I forgot. That's the thing I wanted to mention too. The revving of the engine is almost built into the score as well, just like a lot of the sound design gets built in. You're unsure if that's like low double bass tremolo or something, and then you see the car and you're, it's the Batmobile. I love this Batmobile. I love that it's just like this homemade hot rod, piece of shit car. It's so rad.
This has become my favorite Batmobile. I got the Hot Wheels for it. It's beautiful.
It's because it looks like the car built by somebody who's a maniac. It doesn't that was my okay. I don't like Stepping on the Dark Knight because I think it's a wonderful movie, but that was one of my problems with the Batmobile, The Dark Knight. It's like, okay, it's a tank. The stakes have been removed. You win. You have a tank. It also just makes me feel like I'm watching a billionaire, which I know I am, but I feel like I'm watching a billionaire in The Dark Knight. In this, I feel like I'm watching a trauma survivor, which may be a little bit more apt. And I think it's important that the Riddler points out that Batman is separated from orphans. He's not a real orphan. He's a billionaire. Because throughout the movie, we are in the mind of the Batman. And I think to some degree, when we see the Batmobile, we're supposed to think it's as cool as Batman thinks it is.
I think the movie does do a few notes of like trying to make you recognize like Bruce Wayne's privilege, while also being like, he can also have trauma. He can also have horrible trauma. And those things are not mutually exclusive.
Well, because they tell it from the perspective of Bruce Wayne. So you're really supposed to be in the head, or in his head, and feeling his trauma. And that comes across really well, right? You really do feel like, wow, there's a lot of dissociative pain going on in this character. And I think it's really deliberately done that the Riddler towards the end of the movie says, you're not a real orphan, you're just a billionaire in an ivory tower, and stuff. And it's meant to be a moment where the audience and Bruce Wayne at the same time go, oh yeah, there's some privilege here. We got a little wrapped up in this because we're being told the story from the perspective of the Batman. So up until that point, you're kind of just supposed to be like, yeah, go get him, Batman, you poor orphan. And then the perspective is displayed. And that's the moment when that integral shift happens in the movie and the Batman can start growing into a servant of the people. So none of this stuff happened by accident. It's all on purpose.
and just, a quick rundown of the Vengeance theme. Giacchino does such a good job of slowing it down or using different instruments with it and all this kind of stuff for the detective work, stalking the Penguin. He brings in this big dramatic drum sound for when Bruce is breaking into the Iceberg Lounge. Mm-hmm. And then like maybe one of the most Imperial March sounding versions of it is in that hallway scene when he comes up in the elevator. I think that's the closest I get to hearing it like very in sync with the Imperial March.
Yes, definitely. It's because the rhythm is the same. It goes one more note. Wait a minute. Yeah. In fact, wow, funny. Talking about music theory right now. The Vengeance theme is a major third, and every major chord. The major third is the most prominent harmony, but every major chord has three notes: the root, the major third, and what's called the fifth. And if you add the fifth, you have the Imperial March. It's just one note of the major chord removed. Both of them use major, like the least major sounding themes. It's so crazy. There's a whole essay to be written on the use of major in imposition. Anyway.
And then one last note on different uses of the Vengeance theme, the way he employs it when Bruce is fighting with the gunman makes it feel really impressive how Batman is mowing through them.
Yeah, it's like blam, 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 blam. That kind of like flight and movement. Yeah, it's utilizing space really effectively, which is to say that it's not hammering away at the theme. It's using it for moments like when he's like flying through the air or like throwing a punch or something to give the action more emphasis, right? And not just like it's not like that, right? It's very constructed and well conceived,
right?
Oh. Yeah, I mean, not to deep throat this entire score, but it's pretty good, so it's kind of worth it.
Do you want to do any final thoughts on it?
Oh, let me think about this for a second. We really covered all my notes. I was actually really impressed and surprised at how similar our notes were. I was like thinking, oh man, I'm going to have to talk about all these things and find places to bring them up. And it's like, oh no, Sam Brown got this. So, all right, great. Yeah, we kind of touched on all the things that I wanted to touch on. I mean, really, I wanted to wrap it back to what I was talking about at the beginning, the sort of like thesis of it, that themes are still integral to the to our connection to the characters in movies, and they can be really, really simple and still be effective. The thing that I wanted to talk about most about it, though, was just that, as we go out and continue to watch movies, paying attention to the themes when we do watch those movies gives us a different insight on the characters. But we're going to be left wanting with a lot of movies if we try and pay too much attention to the score, because it's not always done this well. It's not always done in this way. So, hopefully the takeaway, to anybody listening is like, take an active participation in listening to the movie score as you're watching the movie. And you might start recognizing, where the movie score is failing and where it's succeeding. Really the most important thing in regards to this movie is that themes aren't dead, themes are still alive, and they can be really, really simple. And sometimes the simplicity of it is what makes it so good. In this case, it's like it was like it had to be simple by design of the film. So yeah, just themes are great and should still be used.
I think going off that note is like, do that with movies where something in the score is already standing out to you, I think.
Something in the way?
so that you're pursuing that, because it's pretty hard to it's really hard to pick out all the nuances of the score the first time you watch it. I appreciated so much, this is really the first time, except for maybe The Last Jedi, which has a bonus feature, digital bonus feature, where you can watch the movie with just John Williams' score, which is you say an improvement?
Yes.
How dare you?
No, I like The Last Jedi. I'm just joking.
I know you do. But I think this was the first time, aside from that, where I really focused on the score while watching the film, completely.
Yeah.
At every beat, what is happening with the score here? What is happening with the score here? Instead of just the moments when it's most noticeable.
Yeah, I think we're kind of culturally. I don't want to say influenced, but encouraged maybe to pay less attention to the scores in a lot of modern blockbuster. We're mostly to pay attention to whatever the hype of the franchise is pushing at the time. So maybe we'll make a difference. Maybe people will start taking an active participation in listening to music, and it'll change the whole world.
I think when it comes to franchises, themes are more important than they are in individual films.
Oh yeah,
because the Indiana Jones franchise, for example, isn't as good if that theme isn't just incredible. Right? Because
Twinkle Little Star, baby.
because what that does is what that does is it connects you to characters in a way that you don't often. And so what we talked about in the beginning with the MCU, one of the things that we were talking about for a very, very, very long time is how the MCU kind of missed a trick. And when you're watching the Avengers, the Iron Man theme plays. You're like, oh, there's Iron Man. I'm so happy to see Iron Man. I'm pumped because Iron Man is here. Captain America has a distinctive theme that I really like, and that gets some play, but no one else does. And I think over time, themes have kind of emerged, and things have been, and what was kind of background music has been used as themes, but there wasn't really a concerted effort to do something like that. And
spotting. We talked about spotting right earlier, about how you need to go through the process of spotting to put music in your movie in integral points so that it tells the story along with the movie. And that was the missing piece from the macro of the Avengers, the Marvel MCU, is nobody did spotting for the whole big picture.
Yeah.
And what happens is, just like you're saying, later on, maybe somebody goes back and writes a theme, and now that theme gets used, but it's not established in the beginning, so who cares? Yes, Captain America has a good theme, but it isn't developed and utilized across the zoomed out MCU, not to its potential anyway.
Yeah.
And so I'm a composer with pretty good pitch. I can't remember what it sounds like, and I've seen all the MCU movies many times.
The thing is, it all but disappears by the time Winter Soldier rolls around.
And that's like the peak of his like character arc in the films anyway. That's where it should be most prominent.
Yeah. And so, but all this is to say that I think what the Batman did so well is kind of. And the reason why I think it was important to start this show with the Batman, and we've got a list of movies that we're going to go through, and I'm really excited that we're doing the show finally. I'm grateful as hell to be here, the 9th podcast on the Victor Podcast channel, and I think that what is so important to know is that this film isn't an anomaly. It is rarer to get something like this now, but it happens. And it's really nice when it does. And it's really great that we can dive into a score like this. And it's really awesome that this film exists with a score that at first glance was simple, only to realize how complicated it really was.
In fact, to what you're saying there, I think I disregarded it immediately for its simplicity because I've come to expect to be disappointed by scores. I heard like, oh, that's not very interesting. Next. But if I had not been so jaded, I might have taken an active engagement a lot earlier on and been like, oh, what are they going to do with that? But because I'm just so used to movies not really impressing me with scores, I just, whatever. There are a lot of composers out there, modern composers in more independent contexts that are doing a really good job. Like Desplat is something that somebody that comes to mind, in his work with like Wes Anderson. I always love the music he does for Wes Anderson's movies, always, and they're always distinctive. You have other people I don't do as much these days, like Howard Shore, but man, Howard Shore is great. God, there's a lot of composers that are still alive from like the golden era that I don't hear anything from anymore, like Bruce Broughton or Randy Edelman.
What was the last time you heard James Newton Howard? Right?
Exactly.
I was thinking about that the other day. Like, where'd he go?
Yeah.
And John Williams we also wouldn't hear anymore if they didn't keep pulling franchises out, bringing them out of retirement.
I have a theory on this, and I'm probably wrong. I don't have enough research to back it up, but I'll just say it. I think that a lot of these people are, what's the term in for a director, auteurs? I think as far as composers go, I think it's regionally Howard Shore, James Newton Howard, these people, or James Newton.
Howard,
Howard. Oh, Howard Shore, James Newton Howard. Weird. I think I don't know them personally, but I imagine they probably have a streak of perfectionism and are very like serious about their craft. And maybe they don't like the way that Hollywood is molding the music to the movies anymore. And maybe they're taking on less projects because they're like, I don't want my artistic control to be compromised by attaching myself to this movie. And we don't see them as much. They do independent films. If you go and you look at the Spotify for a lot of these composers, it's like, oh wow, this was released last year. I never heard about this movie, and I think it's just because more and more of these really great composers are trying to work with people that give them more creative control than these giant corporate entities are allowing for. So the people that remain are the people that can work with the system or don't mind that level of control, or people like Hans Zimmer who've established a company, like their company within this system to sort of like, I don't want to say exploit, but they're basically part of the system. Hans Zimmer is a composer, but he's also a company with a lot of people that do writing under him. That's
why Hans Zimmer can do a movie like Dune and The Boss Baby.
We'll generously say Hans Zimmer had a hand in Boss Baby.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. I mentioned this on the podcast, and I'm sure we'll do an episode on Hans Zimmer. I'm sure we'll do something about his score. I mentioned this on the podcast that I think there's two Hans Zimmers. I think there's Hans Zimmer and Hans Zimmer's intern. There's Hans Zimmer who does Dune.
A lot of interns.
No, but like I'm generalizing, obviously.
Yes, of course.
There's obviously Hans Zimmer who's doing Dune. Dune has a great score. I like Dune. I think Hans Zimmer did Dune. And then there's his intern who's doing the boss baby.
And what's more too is something that doesn't get talked about a lot is, especially in regards to like Dune, Alan Meyerson, the producer, he's got a huge hand in the sound of Hans Zimmer because he is the final say on the production quality. And when it comes to Dune, not very many hummable melodies in Dune, but a lot of really cool sounds, right? That's a lot of Alan Meyerson. Oh boy, what was I going to say? I had a thing, but I lost it. Oh, I was going to say, to Hans Zimmer's credit, though, he is very good about not wanting to take sole credit for things. He is, pretty vocal about like, hey, it's a collaborative process. I'm not the only person involved here. But culturally speaking, we tend to attribute a lot of artistic design and work to single entities, single people, because we see a name attached and we go, oh, that's a Hans Zimmer thing. And even when they don't try and take up that mantle themselves, it's like we have a hard time distancing ourselves from that relationship to artists. We think, oh, so-and-so did this. They're solely responsible. But that's not always the case. And I think we see that a lot in movie scores, just like we see a composer attached to a project and we think, oh, they did this. But on that exact subject, take John Williams. We keep coming back to John Williams. There are eras of John Williams, and those eras are very demonstrably divided between who his orchestrator was at the time. Herb Spencer is like Raiders and Star Wars, and then he passed away. And I think Jurassic Park, I may be mistaken, Jurassic Park was the first time that he didn't have Herb Spencer. Listen to the scores back to back for like Raiders, or Temple of Doom is a really good example. It was like Herb Spencer and John Williams just like flexing on each other. And if you listen to that back to back with Jurassic Park, you can hear a very distinct difference in the tone and color palette, because he had I'm going to get these names wrong. Christian Pope and Alexander Courage were his orchestrators. I think there was another third guy there in Jurassic Park. But there was a lot more, too many cooks. There's a lot more hands in the kitchen. Well, hello. Whoa. Okay, a lot more hands in the kitchen for that score, and it shows. There's a very big difference. To me, like, you guys hear that?
Yeah. What's going on
next door or something? Somebody's like moving a huge table or something. It sounds like, to me, like the combination between Herb Spencer and John Williams is like a band. That's like my favorite band is those two guys working together. And not to say I don't like Jurassic Park, because it's one of my favorite scores, but also it's a totally different score and a totally different sound. And like everything from that era on was a totally different John Williams sound if you really go in and analyze it. And so it comes back to, we attribute the works to single people. We think, oh, this is all John Williams across the board. But like, think of the different eras of John Williams. There's different sounds to be had, and people don't always pay attention to that. So,
all right, well,
I think that's something we'll be striving to do with the show going forward. We've got, as Brandon alluded to earlier, we have a fantastic list of films for this year. We haven't quite filled in every single slot, but we're close. And we're going to give you one a month. Expect us every third Monday of a month, and that's when we'll be here talking about scores. Okay, so that'll do it for today's discussion on this score of The Batman by Michael Giacchino. A rousing premiere episode for us, I think.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll close out with Brandon, where can the folks find you?
Well, you can find me all over the internet. BT McClure on Instagram and Twitter. Just those are my social medias. I also write for CBR.com. I write lists for them. I also write for AtomicGeekdom.com, where I write news and features and things like that. And I write for KaijuRamenMedia.com, where I also edit their website. You can find all sorts of pieces there. Wonderful collaborators and team, all of them. As well as, of course, there's the Fichtner podcast. This is part of the Fichtner podcast family of podcasts. So there's tons of shows that you want to check out at fichtnerpodcast.com if you like this and you're like, gee willikers, what else do they do? Bunch. Go to fichtnerpodcast.com and you can check out all sorts of things.
And you can find me on Instagram most primarily. That's where I tend to post my music, and just I'm on there as Jeremy Villucci. I think my my handle though is Jeremy Villucci _ Wreck of Time, because my band Wreck of Time, and which you can also find Wreck of Time on Instagram and YouTube and Spotify, all that stuff if you like progressive metal. And we just released an album in October, so that's out there. And where else can you find me? I guess Twitter, Jeremy Villucci on Twitter. I don't do much on social media these days. I should do more.
All right. And lastly, you can find me for my socials. They're all related to the Fake Nerd Network. So you can find me at Sparks Witty, SPARKZ Witty. I'm mostly involved in on Fake Nerd Network stuff, so that's where you'll check it out. If you enjoyed hearing us talk about this, you can hear Brandon and I give more thoughts on the Batman from when it came out by going to the Fake Nerd Network and looking up our Batman review. It's there. So check all that out. And here we are. And that'll do it. And we'll see you next time on The Real Score.
Yeah, and if you want to hear me talk more about the Batman, just go into the middle of the city, find me on a street corner. I will just be shouting, or just screaming about my opinions on the Batman and really just like corporate involvement in movies in general. And it's a really good time. You know, we bring snacks. There's hot dogs. There's chips. Lots of chips. Too many chips, really. Help me eat chips while I scream about Batman. Come scream about Batman and eat chips.
I really expected you to do too many chips on the piano, and I was
Oh, a lost opportunity for a motif that we were blending through the whole episode. We got to do the whole show again.
I'll do the intro for it. Do you have any other lighting, Jeremy?
I got this motherfucker.
Did that change something?
Did it not?